I'd like to call this meeting to order. Are there any announcements? See, we have visitors. Spoke to this gentleman already. Well, it's good to see you, sir. You're not wearing shorts. Yeah, 20 more degrees and I'll start changing my bad habits. Greg, good to see you, sir. Good to see you. Okay. Not hearing any. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda. Do we have a second? Sorry, sir. Go ahead, John.
Mr. President, if you'd like, please add permit 2023-18.
Oh, I will. Okay, forgive me. I should have done that first. I would like to do that under engineer. I'd like to add the Rhonda Pierce and Associates for the MnDOT project. And we will just put that lastly under the last item under administrator engineers. Good to see you, Miss Lauren.
Later on.
That's quite all right. Okay. Now I'm going to ask for the approval of the agenda. I made a motion. Do I have a second?
Second,
Been moved and
with
seconded.
the amendment.
Yes, with the amended engineering. Permit review.
There was something, managers, that Susanna wanted discussed under the attorney report.
Okay, we can,
So that should be added as well.
yes, ma'am. Any particular title? I'm sure it's long.
Maintenance and easement agreements related to permit 2024-14.
Okay, we will add that on to our attorneys. Okay, so if nobody has anything else. Yes, sir.
Since I'm the recording secretary, who moved and seconded that?
I seconded. Yeah, Rick seconded. Okay. I see Mr. Armstrong isn't here today, so I will have to read the statement from Washington County in absentia, right? That would call that. Sir. Oh, voted? Indeed. Aye. 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 The agenda is approved with the additions we have. Public forum, anybody wishing to speak? Do we have anybody with us electronically, John?
Mr. President, Mark Anderson joined us. He's with Sambatech for item number 4 under engineering.
Very good, sir. Is the gentleman's name again, please?
Mark Anderson.
Mr. Anderson. Welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Good to be here.
At least you didn't say glad to be seen, because that wouldn't have worked. Right? Thank you. Okay. With those items, cover everything. I'd like to move to the consent calendar. Now, the managers, I've got a couple of items. If the managers have anything, thank you very much. Y'all receiving a copy? Here you are. Sorry about that. You have that. These two different. Sorry about the delay here. We're just acquiring this information. One for each and pass it down, right?
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I think I got that right. So do the managers have any particular item on the consent calendar that they would like to pull or have any commentary on? Commentary? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Just on the stewardship grant proposals that we have this week, I liked the looks of those with the phosphorus reduction rather than just the smaller plant grants. I thought those were good.
Very good, sir. John, is that a result of our last meeting And that information was conveyed to, Ms. Thompson.
Mr. President, I conveyed information that the managers like to see a little bit more detail in the memos, but these are maybe different than what you've seen most of the year, because these are not native plant grants, they're actually stewardship grants, as Secretary Bach mentioned. Payments are based on the pounds of phosphorus removed rather than a flat.
But I also did notice more detail, so I thought maybe, but that's fine.
Mr. President, I also asked that she include a running tally of how much has been committed to the various projects, and so that's included in the packet. It's the
Right, I saw that.
table with the color code.
Thank you very much. I see that we're getting close to saturation, right? Okay, very good. Okay, I would like to pull two items, item C and item D, and those are just questions I have. So with that said, I would like to make a motion to approve items A, B, E, F, G, H, and I. Do I have a second?
Second.
The moving second.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you. The first one on item C for the agreement between the Washington Conservation District and members of East Metro Water Resources Education Program. Big question is, what is our commitment to them? I forgot, so I want to know. Is it 16,000 or 24,000? What is that amount by chance?
24,500.
Okay. All right, and this is mostly education, correct?
Yes, this
Okay,
funds Angie Hong and their assistants.
right, very good, sir. Okay. Does anybody have anything on that by chance? No? Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve item C. Do I have a second? Second. Moved and seconded.
Aye.
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 Aye, it is approved. Okay, item D. Could you put that up for us? Mr. Engineer? I need help on just one item on that regarding the piece of property. How much of that site there are they going to use? It looks like the northern tip of that rectangle for a rain garden. Is that some massive rain garden?
Mr. President, managers, these are existing contours, so this is a very steep slope. The rain garden is proposed in this area.
Oh. Okay. What's happening up there? That's just,
Nothing, you're not planning to touch.
What? Okay. that remains wild, so to speak. Okay. All right, that's the only question I had about that. Okay, with that said, I would like to make a motion to approve permit 2024-37, the Breeze residence. Second. It's moved and seconded. Aye. 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 All right, thank you, gentlemen. That's all squared away. Let's move to administrative engineer. Draft plan issue statement and goals, volume 2. Okay. That's, you ready? Thank you, sir. Please, lead us.
Thank you, Mr. President, managers. This is the highly anticipated sequel to the goals and issue statements, volume 1. Currently has 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. So that when we last met, we talked about the goals and issue statements related to the high priority issues. These are the issue statements and goals related to the medium and low priority issues. If you recall that graphic, but the highest priority issues are surface water quality and then water quantity, flood risk, and climate resiliency. Medium priority issues are related to groundwater, stormwater management, wetlands, and then the low priority issues are uplands and natural areas. And some of the differences there is that the high priority issues are those that it's anticipated that Valley Branch will kind of be the lead in addressing those, whereas for some of the medium priority issues, the district may allocate fewer resources to them or work in a more cooperative or supportive role for other entities who may have a more direct management role. There are 3 issues under groundwater.
Okay,
The first being groundwater serves as a drinking water source in the watershed and is contaminated by polyfluoroalkyl substances or PFAS, nitrates, and other contaminants. So the issue statement is just acknowledging that groundwater is the primary drinking source and is polluted.
Is that all groundwater? And that's kind of the way I was reading it. And it seems like it's some of the groundwater is
Yes,
impacted.
that's right.
That might be worthwhile putting in.
Sure. The first goal is focused on kind of an educational piece, and the goal 1A to connect watershed residents with partner resources to understand, assess, and mitigate drinking water quality issues.
okay,
Goal 1B is to limit the potential for groundwater contamination from district projects and projects subject to district review.
okay, so lead us here, Greg.
Sure.
What's happening? What are we gonna do this evening?
The,
So that we can streamline this as best.
Just looking for feedback on these, if you have comments on the draft goals. The idea is that once these have been through a round review with you as the managers, then we'll convene a broader technical advisory committee that will include state agencies, city technical staff who would like to attend to review and provide additional input on these goals. So if you have specific comments related to specific goals, we can jump to those. Otherwise, we can kind of walk through them. So whatever you prefer.
Thank you, we could do that. Rick, do you have any comments or? Rock?
Yeah, I have several.
Please,
Under issue 2,
2A, oh,
Yeah.
issue 2, I'm sorry, go
well,
ahead.
actually, under issue 2, it's just a question about, can we maybe be more explicit about defining or delineating where karst geology may have impacted the district? I guess it's kind of in 2A. I see it as kind of an education opportunity for, planners in the communities and stuff that for them to have more information up front, maybe gets things steered away from karst areas or recognize that when developers come in earlier in the process and may be useful to us. Maybe that comes out of 2A, as we learn more, we provide that information. It seems like it'd be useful to make sure that information gets out to people.
Yeah, it could be work. I think it's implicitly, I think you're right. There's some degree of inclusion of that implicitly in the second goal too, to prevent or mitigate the negative impacts from surface water interaction, like communicating that information to relevant parties, either planners or developers might fall under that. But we could also amend the language to goal 2A rather than just understand groundwater surface water interaction characteristics. It could be understand and share, or understand and
Great.
communicate.
Great, yep, I like that.
But also a visual, not just what we've written, but do we have anything like that at this point, or can we have that where we indicate where the karst areas are? If we haven't established that already.
I believe it's part of the web map.
It's already there. Okay, please.
Mr. President Managers, everything shaded in the orange or gold areas have been mapped by the DNR as potentially karst. And then all of the little dots have been mapped as sinkholes or other karst features. So oftentimes when the permit applicant comes in as a pre-application meeting, first thing I do is pull up this map and determine whether it's been mapped as karst or not. And if it has, then that often leads to them having to spend more money with their geotechnical folks to determine if it really is karst or not, to determine if infiltration is feasible or if it's prohibited by the ECA.
Thank you.
Great.
Just making sure. Thank you, John.
Any additional comments on issue 2 for the goals?
I have none. You, none. Mr. Brock?
Nope.
Okay. Let's move to issue 3, please.
Issue 3 is related to groundwater quantity. And this is the sustainability of groundwater resources is threatened by consumptive use within the watershed. Okay. Goal is to prevent the negative impacts on groundwater sustainability resulting from development, redevelopment, or district projects.
Is it realistic for us to expect to prevent it?
I actually just added a comment here that maybe it's more appropriate to say limit. That's
Limit?
parallel to the language in goal 1B as well.
Thank you.
And then goal 3B is to increase the use of water conservation practices by landowners within the watershed. I think that would be achieved largely in coordination with like MREP to support the education.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Very good. All right, nothing else from the managers. Please move on to issue 4.
These are related to stormwater management. It's also a medium priority issue. Issue 4 states that ongoing maintenance of stormwater management infrastructure is needed to achieve the intended benefits of VVWD and partner projects. As part of our initial engagement, member cities cited maintenance of stormwater BMPs as one of their biggest concerns and something that takes a lot of resources. So it's highlighted here as an issue. And so the first goal is to understand the condition and performance of district-owned stormwater management infrastructure. It's kind of a little bit of an ongoing practice that you guys are already doing with respect to inspecting and monitoring your BMPs. But no reason the plan shouldn't take credit for what you're already doing.
Okay, great.
And then 4B is just the back end of that, is to maintain the performance of district-owned and operated stormwater infrastructure. So goal 4A is keep an eye on it, and then if corrective action is needed, goal 4B is to maintain that infrastructure.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The one question I had is, do we need to address at all maintenance on all the permitted BMPs, stormwater BMPs that we have throughout the watershed? We have permits on that have maintenance agreements or requirements. Is there anything we should mention about those under this question?
Greg?
Yeah, no, that was the same question I was thinking of as well. You know, having some periodic feedback is what I was kind of contemplating, of permitted, you know, maybe limiting it to large structures of some sort, larger kinds of thing, projects. Just to make sure those are still working properly. I guess I'm not even sure if we have authority to go in and say, no, it's not working properly, now fix it. I know, you know, we have the right to go in and do the inspection, but I'm not sure what else we can do.
I think John can speak.
I'm looking at Lauren, but
Yeah, I think that's always the question, right? What does enforcement look like? And then what are the costs associated with enforcement? We've had to have this conversation on a small scale. But it also could be a larger scale.
Just be clear, my comment wasn't necessarily, we're gonna send Jeff out with a full list going, go out and inspect these and drop the hammer on anybody that's not. But that it's more, it's just, we come across something or somebody asks us about maintenance on something and assistance may be available to do that. I just thought maybe we ought to at least have it mentioned in our plan so that it's something we could say we're, reading our plan.
Kind of being aware of and maybe
Right.
educating the property
Yeah,
owner.
I was not advocating a fall out, go out and inspect this stuff and get after people.
Mr. President,
As
managers,
needed phrase there.
I guess as an example, what Warren distributed, if you look on the top of page 3, paragraph G, that does give Valley Branch Watershed District the authority to go in and do maintenance and charge it back to the permit pool. That's not necessarily an easy task to do,
Right.
but there is the ability to do that. I guess maybe to address some of these comments, maybe goal 4A could be understand the condition and performance of district owned, district permitted, and district operated stormwater management.
Yeah.
So you understand it, and then maybe goal 4 would be maintain the performance of district owned and operated stormwater management. And under the district responsibility, or somehow phrase it that if there is a responsibility of the district, because a lot of the responsibility is on the landowner or the community in which the project lies.
It's a support maintenance, privately owned.
President Rishon managers also, when it comes to the cities, they're responsible through their MS4 reporting. They're responsible to inspect and maintain their facilities. So
It's not all communities are in the sports and villages.
true.
There will also be an implementation narrative as part of the plan that will describe those maintenance requirements of like who is responsible for the maintenance, even if it's not included as explicitly as a goal. That like as part of the BBWD permitting process, these projects have to create maintenance agreements, which are agreed to by the BBWD. But I like the idea of adding that a goal to support maintenance of privately owned stormwater infrastructure. Privately owned, BBWD permitted.
Very good. Okay. Issue 5.
If you find restrictions on infiltration due to karst geology, high groundwater, and other factors limit limit feasible options for stormwater treatment. This goes back, it's somewhat related to the karst stuff. It's getting at the issue of infiltration restrictions, that some of those factors make it difficult to infiltrate stormwater. So the goal here is to understand those watershed characteristics that limit the use of infiltration, adopt stormwater performance standards appropriate to those conditions or characteristics, and communicate with cities and townships on suitable types of development in areas of stormwater management restrictions. So similar to some of the others, it's focused on kind of understanding the issue and coordinating with cities and their planners.
We're already doing this, right?
Yes.
And then maybe one step further is 5B, to collaborate with cities, townships, and partners to promote consistency among stormwater performance standards where infiltration is prohibited.
Yeah. That's something. That one's simple enough.
Yeah, I think that's a logical extension of what you guys are doing now. I know that as part of the comment period and through discussions with South Washington Watershed District, they're struggling with the idea of what to do in more and more projects that are unable to infiltrate. Stormwater reuse isn't a feasible option, and wanting to look at the big picture with folks like Valley Branch about what's a reasonable way to get around that.
Anything else from any of the managers? All right, issue 6, please.
Issue 6 is somewhat related to the new goal that was added to 4. It says strong stormwater regulations are necessary to limit the negative environmental consequences from development and redevelopment activities. And this speaks directly to the fact that you currently have a permit program with appropriate stormwater management standards, and those are in place to limit negative environmental impacts. And so the goal is the outcome of that. The goal is to limit those negative impacts on water quality, flood risk, and ecological health through the consistent application of appropriate performance standards. And this goal could also be modified through application of appropriate performance standards and subsequent maintenance if you wanted to tie in the previous goal.
Maintenance. Again, don't we do that already? To what level?
Well, the watershed district rules attempt to limit the negative consequences of development
Right.
through the control, water control, wetland buffers, and regulations and such.
Issue 7.
Issue 7 is a little more positively focused. It says that opportunities for environmental improvements resulting from development and redevelopment may be gained through coordination between the VBWD developers and land use authority planning staff. And this is speaking to the idea that they're through more intensive or earlier coordination with development, there may be opportunities to take advantage of areas where maybe you can infiltrate or do treatment above and beyond, or, you know, which either could be funded part by Valley Branch or other partners, or just the idea that through the coordination, there may be opportunities to take advantage of those cases.
So this is something that arises, or that is something that we try to take advantage of
Yeah,
as they come.
if you know about it, sometimes you don't know about it until it's too late. So the
Yeah.
goal here is to develop a process to engage with those land use authorities to help facilitate those opportunities.
Okay,
I like that one. That's really good. I think that's, where we can leverage our capabilities.
And these could
yeah,
these could be opportunities that are like above and beyond, like our standard permitting stuff that we have to do and whatever.
And I think this also fits into, that one of the higher priority issues and goals was related to chlorides, and talking about doing exactly this, but this is consistent with.
Yeah, fluoride would be like one example of something like falling under this goal.
right.
Wetlands were also a medium priority issue. There's one issue under wetlands, issue 8, and that says the wetlands within the watershed and their beneficial functions are threatened by development and redevelopment activities and climate change. So the first goal is very similar to what you already do. It's to limit the loss or degradation of wetlands in the watershed through administration of the Wetland Conservation Act and performance standards for development, redevelopment. That's what you're already doing.
Okay,
Goal 8B is to add to and or enhance the quality of wetlands within the watershed through restoration projects.
give us some examples of that. Such as, is that part of something that we're doing, or are we focusing directly on the wetland? Enhance it or prevent further degradation? Because that's what seems to be happening.
Mr. President, this would be something new that I don't have an example of what Valley Branch has done in the past as far as wetland restoration. Here is a example of a wetland banking project, which is goal
Yeah.
8C, but as far as a wetland enhancement project, I can't think of a direct example.
So
Yes, sir.
I kind of look at 8B as kind of a little bit above what we talked about under issue 7. It could be involved with a project, or, you know, there might be partners that are doing something, and there happens to be a wetland that's severely degraded that could be restored to a healthier state, and maybe we might have an opportunity to come in and partner and help these other
Right.
parties achieve that.
Give them a massive surety. I'm kidding. But something to enhance that.
I guess another example is a few years ago, Washington County did some enhancements for some of the wetlands within the Gilmore Park Reserve. So that would be something, they led that project, but Valley Branch could too. Managers like and salvage it.
Okay, there you have it. So it's on our radar, right? C, which is essentially what we're talking about. Pursue these opportunities, so when things come up, permitting, other things, Mr. Inspector, if you happen to be in a spot.
But specific, it's
Sir.
specific to banking.
Yeah, are we thinking about keeping the banking in our watershed district or,
Yes, that, to me, that's really the situation. It's like, if we've got, you know, they need to mitigate wetlands, and if they're doing up in Chisago County, well, that's good for the, you know, the St. Croix Valley, but what is it really doing for Valley Branch?
right?
I would much rather have a wetland bank acting in the district, so that when we've got a project occurring where they need to you know, to mitigate wetlands, they can do it nearby. And that seems to keep it much more valuable to our constituents.
Also, another thought that I had, this might seem far-fetched, but I've observed, you know, and maybe moat is not the proper word to use for this one particular development. You guys know what it is. Across 15 here from the airport. But I noticed that there is a natural vegetation that comes in. I don't know how that's going to be maintained, what's happening, but I'm seeing more waterfowl. You know, obviously, we're not going to see fish or things like that, but there could be many other organisms that could take advantage of this. And again, I don't know what those effects are for mitigating pollutants, as we know that wetlands do. So maybe we're creating wetlands with this sort of stuff. I don't know. I hope I'm right. You know, I hope it doesn't turn into dredging operations. There's one water body that is just south of 30th here, you know, with what the airport did. And it seems to be growing, although I see a lot of waterfowl and stuff in there, but it used to be, I don't know how deep it is or what it's doing, but it seems to be effective in that it's creating habitat, you know, and also holding water, you know. Again, too much of a discussion at this point, but I think that maybe we might have something there. So maybe we can take advantage of those things too. Crazy? No?
Well, I think that's, you know, in 8B, that's kind of the focus of that.
Yep.
I
Okay.
think that's worthwhile.
Uplands and natural areas, issue 9.
This is a low priority issue.
Okay.
The degradation or loss of natural upland areas reduces wildlife habitat and impacts the integrity of natural ecosystems. So the first goal here is to implement projects to improve the ecological health of upland areas as part of adjacent water quality, flood risk reduction, and or aquatic ecosystem projects. So this is acknowledging that it may not be the priority for Valley Branch to do projects strictly to enhance upland areas, but there may be opportunities if it's adjacent to another project that is more in line with your primary objectives, high priority issues. There may be adjacent opportunities to kind of add benefit, economies of scale stuff.
At the very least, education. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if, under that, we should say implement projects, or partner with others. I mean, it seemed like this would be an item where we might not be in the lead, this, would be
Yeah.
maybe just play some sort of a supporting role.
I think that's a good idea.
It's kind of in 9B a little bit, by landowners and partners.
And education should be incorporated into that as well. Because that's gonna be ongoing. We have to do this. We don't want to nag everybody, but we want them to understand that they have to establish an ecosystem in their backyards. It's good. We're gonna talk. Okay. Everybody comfortable with that? 10?
This is related to aquatic invasive species. Going back to the first group, under water quality, there was an issue related to aquatic invasive species that directly impact water quality, such as curly leaf pondweed or rough-fish. This is kind of the other side of that. This is an issue related to aquatic invasive species that don't explicitly or directly impact water quality.
Okay.
So the presence and proliferation of aquatic invasive species negatively impact ecological health and recreational use of lakes, streams, and ponds. So this is looking at it from just the overall ecology and recreation versus the water quality angle. And this is, again, the goal is related to a supporting role. It says provide technical resources for partners seeking to manage AIS that do not directly impact water quality. One opportunity here would be, right now, the goal as an issue right now are limited to aquatic invasive species versus upland invasive species. That would be an opportunity. You could consider providing technical support for those types of projects as well. It's entirely up to you.
Right, and what Ms. Thompson is doing for us, or that is these particular projects, more expensive, we're removing invasives and buckthorn in particular, and we're restoring for pollinators. Who are the beekeepers on that one? Do you know those, sir? We had one from Miss Lisa Thompson and some folks that are restoring,
Yeah,
I believe it's 12 acres.
Yep,
We already voted on this.
it's right up on Oak Green. It's actually next to a big infiltration basin at the Watershed plan. So it's north of Valley Creek,
Okay,
the south branch, and it's up on the plateau. Farmland, near that, the bike trail.
okay.
Localized LLC bike trail.
Oh, right.
That's actually right across the street from that.
And your bees don't hobnob with their bees, right?
Oh, yeah.
They do.
Yeah. I saw that. I mean, good, this is good.
This is a win-win.
That's within range
You like
for
this.
me, so this is good.
Walk carefully, right?
Yeah.
When you're,
They travel 3 square miles.
wow.
So maybe this should be expanded to just invasive species as opposed to aquatic invasive species.
Sure. I think,
I
know,
think it's very little commitment for the
Yeah.
district to do it here.
at this point, education. Because we're giving them $24,000. At the very least, we could have some literature relating to that. And then see how this budgets in to our future. It's not just the water we're taking care of, but if we take care of the environment around us, then that's going to benefit. Boring?
Great.
Okay, cool. Okay. Next steps.
Next steps are to convene the technical advisory committee to receive feedback on these draft goals as revised to incorporate the comments that I heard last time and these comments here. So these goals would be revised and distributed to the technical partners. Probably try and get a Zoom meeting to hear input on that. And then that input would be brought back to you for your consideration. They are a technical advisory committee. They don't make any decisions about the plan, except Bowser, whether to approve it or not. So, I mean, they might have additions or suggestions that you might say, oh, that's a great idea. They might have things that you decide, no, we don't want to do that.
Very good.
So I will probably try to get that scheduled here in the next month and then bring back their comments.
That would be wonderful. And I don't know how much the weather is gonna affect their involvement. You know, my understanding is that the hearsay that we're supposed to have extra snow this year later. You know, that might not be a good word.
My kids don't believe me. They think we're not gonna have any snow.
Right.
I'll be like, well, Ed said so, so. better
Yeah,
believe
you
it
can
now.
throw me under
Yeah,
the bus.
that's right.
Yeah, who's that guy? Okay, very good, sir. Carry on. You'll keep us abreast of the next development. And then we can look at this, and also, if I may, the managers can contact you by email or whatever and communicate any further thoughts on the matter.
Absolutely.
Or with John, so.
And the next time, when this comes back to you, it will come back with comments from the TAC. And also, I believe I'll be presenting it in the narrative form that it'll appear in the plan. Right now, you've just been reviewing issue statements and goals. Although the issue statements attempt to succinctly describe the issue, there's a lot of context and a lot of things like karst geology, groundwater contamination, as you noted. It's not everywhere. There's certain contaminants and certain plumes that are more important than others. These statements are succinct issue statements, but the idea is that they will be supported by a brief description, perhaps figures or tables to help put it into context in the plan
Yes.
document. And so when I'll bring that back to show you guys a draft of that, along with the comments from the TAC.
Okay. Right, are we good? Do the managers have any further comments? We're good, okay.
When is the final
Oh, there you go.
document? When is the date for the final document? When are we shooting for?
Shooting for fall of 2025. There's a lengthy review cycle in there.
Mhm.
You guys could get a couple of vacations in there before this goes down, right? Yeah. This mountains climb. You're, holy moly. Okay. Mr. Williams, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate all your effort. Keep us abreast. I kind of like this, the way we do this in that, you know, I don't want to just look at it and then somebody says something, and I like to follow through it in this methodical way so that we can address things individually. And so this format's good. So unless you have any different ideas, I like what you're doing.
No, I think my goal is to kind of step through in small bites, the kind of meat of it. You know, the next time you see the goals and issues, like I said, it'll be part of a kind of a denser packet of material where it's supporting narrative, and you know, you may have to sit down with that for a little bit of a longer period of time to review and provide comments. But that's also something where I don't think we necessarily have to go through it in this setting, paragraph by paragraph.
Right,
You guys
yeah,
could share your thoughts on
It could be
pieces
too
here and
involved.
there. Yeah.
but this update's good. You're right. Yeah, it could just take too much time. Okay, thank you again, sir.
Thank you very much.
Our next
Appreciate
item.
the guidance.
Thank you. Thanks for your input.
Okay. Valley Branch Watershed landlocked basin flood mitigation comprehensive planning. Any of the memo, Greg's and I are on this one. Good night. Okay. Now, Mr. Engineer, this is about the pieces of property in Lake, is it Ronald McDonald and Cloverdale, all that stuff. I meant Lake McDonald. And we've looked at these properties already, and you've contacted the people that are high priority. and we have some idea what's happening.
So, Mr. President, managers, this is a continuation of the landlocked basin study that the Watershed District did with Army Corps of Engineers. After that study was complete in December, we prioritized the homes that appeared to be at risk of flooding into low, medium, high. That was presented to the managers this summer, and the managers directed Jen Kaler, Barr, and myself to meet with high priority or the properties that appear to be at high risk of flooding and the medium risk of flooding. Sent out information, and they contacted us, and we've met with 10 of the high priority and 4 of the medium priority landowners. And there's detailed notes that Jen has combined in those 11 by 17 figures included in the memo. Of those meetings, it appears that there's about 4 homes that don't really appear that there's anything that could be done to flood-proof those homes. It just isn't enough room on the land, or
And they're typically the older homes,
Yes.
under 500,000. So, and I'm bringing that up because of where they were built and not, with our rules and regs as they have advanced. So clearly they're a priority, and so what's our take on this, gentlemen? We have to wait and see.
the suggested
Yeah,
next steps that Jen presented in the memo is to send out one more mailing to those that haven't responded to us and meet with them and get a site meeting so we can see the property and understand if there is potential to do some floodproofing. Not, and then after we met with one of the landowners on Downs Lake, they did have their home initially surveyed, and so they would like to have a survey just so we have a detailed survey of what their elevation of their low entry is and in comparison to the flood level. There's also a landowner on Downs Lake that has a swimming pool, and to try to get a survey of that and possibly come up with a concept design to do some floodproofing. For us to meet with, the lowest homes are really in the city of Lake Elmo, Legion. So to meet with the city of Lake Elmo to find out if they would be willing to, or what, I guess, what they're open to, because if we take advantage of the flood risk reduction grants from the DNR, they require the land to be in permanent public ownership. And in the past, the Watershed District hasn't wanted to be a landowner. In this case, maybe since the houses are right next to each other, it might make a nice little neighborhood park for the city of Lake Elmo, and maybe the city of Lake Elmo would be willing to own the land, so Watershed District doesn't have to deal with the complaints of dandelions and trash or whatever. So that would be one step, is to meet with the city and review what we found, get some direction or some indications from staff if that might be something that they'd be going to do. And then come back to the board and maybe plan for voluntary acquisition or plan for some sort of assistance to these local homeowners to do some flood risk reduction.
now at this point, just on Legion Pond, Mr. Inspector, you haven't by chance been in the area?
I was earlier this season
Okay,
during some of the rain, but yeah, there's the pond levels low. Everything's low right now.
yeah, so it's a little
But it's not an
concerned.
issue right now, so yeah, that kind of adds to what their motivation is.
Exactly.
When the water comes up, the motivation changes.
That's when we'll get a knock on our door. maybe.
Right.
Yeah, that's a concern because of course, I've seen, I don't know if any of the managers have seen this, but I've been there where the water was just threatening to come right over and
Yeah.
that's terrible. Yeah. Unbelievable. And it's essentially a log berm that protects them at this point, right?
It is, but the groundwater kind of seeps through the ground and has caused heaving to some of the homes. And so many of the homeowners would love to stay there because they really like the location, but they have experienced the flooding and understand the situation and would be willing to potentially
Sure. Sure, and those homes aren't like the others Those are typically $450,000, that area
Probably something.
around there, okay. Okay. We don't need a motion for this, we can just direct you to follow through with, your next step on that. And then report to us of how we're coming along. So let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
Very good, sir.
Can I ask a process question?
Please.
Just because I'm curious that this is our probably at least our second time at this rodeo, right? So, and I wasn't here when, I was here for the end of the first one. Right. So are we putting more effort forward to better identify the places that could possibly be purchased?
That's this process right here.
Right. So this, but I guess the other way to rephrase the question, is this process kind of more rigorous than maybe what we did in the past? Because what we did in the past, we had a large bond, right? By, very flood prone properties or properties that could not be
Right.
flood proof. But then there was a lot of homes that weren't purchased maybe, or there was a lot of money left, or.
So it's all, on this president managers, it's all voluntary. So
Right,
the Watershed District has identified a lot of homes in the Sunnybrook Lake area that are at risk of flooding, and there isn't really any individual floodproofing opportunity there. And so after the managers came up with a plan that there was going to be a voluntary acquisition program rather than some sort of flood reduction project, there was a greater interest in the program than what the managers had anticipated. Because originally the managers had just thought, we'll just go kind of one by one. But then there was a lot of flooding, and so a lot of people wanted to participate in the program all at once. And so that's why the Watershed District obtained a bond and removed probably about 3/4 of the homes that are too low. But then the water levels receded, and so some of those low property owners have not taken advantage of the program.
okay, let's see. Yeah.
Or,
Tricky part is human memory is pretty brief.
yeah,
Well, we were flooded once, but, like the poor people down in Florida, they're gonna rebuild.
Yeah, then when it
As well
happens
as the
again.
assessment of the future.
So anyways. All right,
holy,
well, this is tough work. I mean, like, credit to Jennifer for, you're meeting with people that obviously are in a very precarious situation, and maybe I'm just sensitized to it because I've got a friend down in Fort Myers Beach that's probably gonna
alligators in his living room.
walk away from it because he can't handle it anymore. So anyways, yeah.
We've seen that. We've seen that. Thank you, John. Oh, and by the way, we got the bill too. See it. Okay, just in case. All right. Let's move on to our next item. This is the chloride workshop. So,
Mr. President, managers, this was in the packet for the last meeting,
Yeah.
and managers asked that it be tabled until after the tour.
okay,
And so we had the tour, and you were able to see some of the large impervious surface areas within the Watershed District. Some of those are referenced as potential management actions in this.
okay, quite honestly, I don't have anything to discuss at this point. Because I could say generically that we followed through what we were planning on with these items, but if any of the other managers have something, then by all means, pipe up and let us know what we want John to do. Yes, sir.
But, I know that there was some discussion at one or two sites about how they manage their snow. When they pile their snow up, right, or when they blow it here or there. Just wondering if upon closer inspection, there's ways they can modify their snow management to reduce potential carrying potential chlorides into adjoining water bodies or whatever.
Mr. President, measures, like, that's, we try to get at a number 6 in the memo on page 30 is to audit these sites in the winter.
That's what we're gonna follow through with. That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Are we going to be required to make a motion for this? Because we're spending money on this? Okay. So
Some comments?
I'm all for it, of course, please.
I think 1 through 4 are pretty, in my mind, are pretty much things, yeah, let's move ahead on those. I wonder about, not so much 5, but number 6, order the large impervious surfaces and stuff. I think it's important to do that, but it seems like we're also in kind of forging out into new ground. And I wonder if there's a way to figure out what we're going to do with everybody by picking, 1 or 2 sites and seeing how that goes, and kind of use that as a way to develop a process or something. It sounds like you maybe, you've kind of incorporated that because I think at one point in here you said the cost for the first one is a lot is a lot higher than the subsequent ones. And maybe that's just the whole thing, but it might be worthwhile, some type of review for the first phase of it, how did this go and what did we learn and how are we going to approach it?
And I think somebody during the tour mentioned maybe a good pilot site would be working with Stillwater Area High School or one of their sites, one of the school sites.
That was me that made that suggestion. I just thought working with the public entity, things would be a little lower key. And maybe we can get our feet wet, doing that rather than approaching Menards or, some big box store, and and at least we'd have a little experience under our belt, know a little bit more
But
about what we're talking about.
And the GIS assessment is what we're gonna do.
Right.
I mean, that's how we have to establish something, right?
Right, that's all fine. I was just thinking that we got down to actually working with somebody on some sort of a site assessment, what can we do a little different here, sort of a discussion, maybe that.
I think you're right. I think that's the best way to handle it. It's more subtle and it's a big site anyway, the high school.
And at one point, we were talking about one of the sites and saying, well, they blow the snow into the wetland. And
At
Fleet Farm.
Fleet Farm, yeah.
And that may actually be a value added because it gets the snow into the wetland before it gets salted. And, and so understanding those types of implications, what are the possibilities here? What is going to actually, be valuable for us in terms of producing that salt?
How do we handle Fleet Farm? We just
Well, but we may be able to learn that at Stillwater in terms of, it's a matter of how do we time it, or how would they time their snow removal process? When does the chloride get put down?
Just understanding where they store the snow, does it melt back onto the pavement and cause icing issues that would lead to chloride use?
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
We know if, water fund is funding anything related to chloride mitigation.
As far as the measures, I know the PCA is looking at chloride as far as updating the Minnesota stormwater manual. And I'm not sure of any projects that have been submitted that are funded through Clean Water Fund to work on chloride mitigation.
And if it's an impairment, identified as an impairment source now, you think that they would look positively at that. I'm just wondering if we had an opportunity to work with a large owner of an impervious surface for doing what would be really expensive retrofitting, but if we can get a grant to do it, that'd be kind of cool as well.
Of course, we always have our feelers out for that, right?
Currently, there aren't any water bodies in Valley Branch that are impaired for chloride, whereas there are some in
Got it.
other watershed districts. But that doesn't mean you can't apply for a grant.
But I like.
It's also nice to
Didn't have it again.
avoid impairment too.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
Like if
it's
it's
way
working
easier
on the
to
problem.
avoid than to try to clean up.
Yeah.
yeah, prevention. That's why I kind of like, and I don't know how we go about it, but examining the Fleet Farm property. Because that might produce valuable information. You know, you're right on that, Rick. The high school for sure. That benefits us in many ways.
Yeah.
And education and everything else that goes.
May bring in some resources, student resources that would be valuable.
Right,
Not necessarily just at this high school, but it could be then expanded to,
oh yeah,
to
their surrounding area. Across the street off of the 5, we don't, that's not us anymore, right? Where the orthopedics and the furniture store. It's not in Valley Branch Watershed District. Across the street from the high school,
No,
West.
that's Brown Street Watershed District.
that's Browns Creek, okay. So I'm thinking the GIS and perviousness assessment, $5,000. WCD is going to continue to monitor the chloride. They've been doing that, right?
Yes, we just need to work with them to do it earlier in the season.
Okay, that seems simple enough. And we're not sure about that cost, but because of what they do for us, that we'll get the bill. Right? Okay. Additional early season chloride monitoring by WCD? Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Definitely.
Okay. Review of historical chloride data and trends. Okay, why is that $3,000? Just out of curiosity, that's an estimate.
I'm not sure what's, Greg left too early.
Okay,
Greg came up with that.
We'll get after Greg on that one. But I don't think there's a problem including that.
You have been doing that as far as
Yeah.
the water quality.
Okay.
Summary.
Now, this thing about meeting with city planners. What's your take on that, John? As far as, is this making suggestions or learning how they go about doing what they're doing, or?
I think it's, if you really want to get a handle on chloride management, I think that this is very important, and I would suggest maybe picking a community, and I'm thinking of Lake Elmo, since there's a lot of development in Lake Elmo, and get ahead of their planning process.
Yes, sir, yeah.
So this made me think about looking for an opportunity where we might get really lucky and find a developer that really is like an Arndt or whoever that's really conservation oriented and says, yeah, we'd be willing to look at arranging our development plans to maximize sun melting snow, so we lessen chloride use or
Right.
whatever. So that's the discussion we had where our permitting process, we enter too late in the game to do that. So rather than, nobody's advocating that we totally overhaul our permitting process, but maybe we can.
No, we're gonna start, incorporate this.
Find an opportunity to work with a couple of developers that want to do the right thing, then we might have a couple of examples that we can show other cities and say, look,
Yeah.
this worked here, can you folks try to do it too?
You could start it as a suggestive, idea, nature. Whatever else we have, and then we can build upon that. That seems reasonable. And then Lake Elmo, perfect. So we'll do that, right? Everybody?
There are people saying start with one.
Yeah, start with one, right, that's Lake Elmo.
Mhm.
And then finally, audit of owners of large impervious sites. Okay. It's, you guys made me a little skittish on this one. How do we go about doing that?
Mr. President, I think it would be
What are the
after
mechanics?
step one, where you evaluate
Okay.
where the impervious surfaces are.
Okay,
You could identify a handful of sites that you would want to audit. And we could work with Inspector Brower or our engineering staff or Washington Conservation District staff to go out there if we get snow this winter and look how they're managing their snow. And then if there's still time in the season, you could possibly work with them, work with the Port Osastoga Area High School to start developing some sort of differences in how they operate, how they manage their snow, or maybe it means some structural device, and develop some plan on that. Negotiate some a cost share if necessary to implement it maybe in 2026. So that's fine.
And I'm thinking that number one,
yeah,
tells us where we should put our priorities on number 5 and number 6. So if it turns out that 80% of the impervious surface is tied up in roadways, and we ought to be talking to the cities and the counties. If it turns out it's, 80% in parking lots, then the parking lots become much more important.
without a doubt. So how much money do you need?
Greg estimated $2,000 per site for these audits.
Okay,
But I think that's, like, what we talked about, I think that could almost be determined, because I think, as we talked about, you want to do some of these other activity numbers prior to.
yeah. So I'm open to suggestions or a motion to what exactly we're going to do and what we're going to spend on to have John sally forth. And,
I'll make a motion.
please,
I'll make a motion that we approve items 1 through 4, and then once we get some of those done, then we discuss it again to talk about the meetings with the city planners and the auditors. Does that make sense?
I think it's brilliant.
So that's my motion, just 1 through 4 for now.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Aye.
unanimous. Boy, that didn't take long, did it? Thank you, John.
Welcome.
Miss Lauren. You did okay?
Great.
Thank you. Okay. Good. Okay. We're still on engineers, right? And I'm not gonna talk about the stuff you just added. It's on the deck. Is that what you added? We're gonna talk about the permit 2021-22, brings it Willowbrook, Oakdale. Okay, lead us into this, please.
Sure. Mr. President, managers, including the packets and memo regarding the springs of Willowbrook and the springs of Lake Elmo. Both these projects rely on stormwater harvesting and reuse in irrigation to meet the Watershed District's volume control rule. So I distributed a response from Mark Anderson at Sambatech and from Jorgen, I think it's signed by Jorgen at Alliant Engineering.
And Mr. Anderson still with us?
And Mr. Anderson is with us, and
I am.
Eric.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I thought we may have put you to sleep. Forgive me.
Eric Hahn is the developer, and he's with us now.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Okay. So we have an idea what's going on here. Oh, what's going on?
Mr. President, managers, both of these projects committed to doing harvesting and reuse to meet the Watershed District's rules. They said that they would irrigate a certain area of land at a rate, I think both of them were 1 inch per week on average during the growing season. And they're between, both of them said, well, actually the Willowbrook one said that they would irrigate at an average rate of 1.1 1 inches per week from April until October. And the Springs said that they would irrigate 1.0 inches from May and through September. With the Willowbrook project, that system was put in place. It's in the memo, I believe it was middle of the summer.
Yep.
And their reported use of approximately 56 to 80,000 gallons per week, for a total of 305 gallons this year. Their commitment was 125 gallons per week, so
125,000.
125,000.
Yes.
So significantly less. However, as you know, this was a very wet early part of the season.
Right.
Up until basically September, and since early September, it's been very, very dry. So the Springs of Lake Elmo project, they began operating at the end of August, and they've used a total of 187 gallons of water for approximately a month, I would guess, and that's far less than the 135,200 gallons per week that they committed to with their permit. And it's been dry since that began.
Okay.
So both of these projects are working toward permit closeout. There's other issues that need to be reviewed and satisfied before the permits could be completely closed out. Like easements for the Springs of Willowbrook, and dealing with the erosion issue at the Springs of Lake Elmo, where there's water going underneath the retaining wall and causing erosion on the Tesla site. But both permits, the permit holder, which is the same for both of these, would like an understanding of where the managers stand as far as the reuse component. If that they have satisfied the rule, condition, or not, and if not, what the managers would like.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm just like a little explanation as far as, if there was an anticipated number that's not been achieved. What is, what's the impediment to being able to achieve the design? I guess my question.
Yeah, I can speak to that if you'd like.
Mr. Anderson, please.
Thank you. So President and Managers, I'm Mark Anderson, Civil Engineer with Samba Tech, and we prepared the design for Continental on the Springs at Lake Elmo project, and the pump was actually just installed here in, I believe it was August. The underground storage system and the storm pipes, and for the most part, the project has been constructed and occupied for well over a year. Unfortunately, the manager of the project didn't realize they had a reclaimed irrigation requirement until the Watershed brought it to their attention. And so once that was identified, the cistern was already there and everything, it just didn't have a pump in it. And so once that was identified, they had to order a pump and get it installed and so forth. So that's why it was delayed. And I wasn't aware that the reclaim pump was not in either. So it is there now, and it has adequate pump capacity and storage capacity to meet the permit pumping requirements. But it wasn't pumped to that extent in the first few weeks, simply because we hadn't identified how much needed to be pumped, how many gallons, how much run time, and so on. So it was installed and operated, and until they raised question to be about how much the storage tank holds and did the math on it, we hadn't realized that they were running short on the required pump volume of 1 inch per week. So There is about 5 acres of green space on the site. And based on, fairly reasonable run times, they should be able to pump down that storage volume on a weekly basis so that it's available for the next rainfall event. Now, this past summer, we had almost record rainfall and so on. Those are some situations where, it may rain more frequently than you can pump down. But I kind of view that as a situation similar to the undeveloped condition where it rains repeatedly, the ground doesn't have any capacity to absorb that water. And so there's more runoff. And so I think the reclaimed irrigation systems reasonably address the irrigation requirement, except in extreme drought conditions, which now the last month or so has been, or in very wet and repeated rain conditions. In both of those instances, the runoff characteristics of the development versus the undeveloped condition are somewhat similar, but they don't present an opportunity to meet the pumping requirements in those scenarios. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Pumps were installed, they were operated, the capacity hadn't been checked until recently, and now, of course, it's been too dry to have any available water to pump. So what we're asking for is to move forward with acceptance of the pump capacity and storage capacity according to the approved plans, and that the owner, Continental, will continue recording the pumping data, if any still occurs yet this year, or otherwise into 2025.
That was, I just have a comment here. I'm addressing our engineer. On requested manager action, full season of monitoring data. Are these nice folks doing that, or are they obligated to do that?
Mr. President, managers, both these systems only became operational or only began operating end of the summer or middle of the summer. And so once they began operating, they did submit some information to me as far as how much water they're using. I believe their maintenance agreement requires them to report annual amounts.
Okay. So maybe it's a strong word, but they're not in compliance with that. Is that correct? How would you characterize that?
Well, there hasn't been a full season of operation.
Okay. And they need to do that?
If the managers want them to. So
Well,
I guess you can think of this maybe as a rainwater garden or infiltration basin,
Okay.
where it gets constructed and there just isn't any precipitation to know whether it infiltrates or not. Or there's so much infiltration that it keeps raining, and you never really have any dry periods, so you don't know if it drains dry within 48 hours.
So we don't know if that's working. That's what's happening here, correct? And that is one aspect of what's apparently holding up this surety. Am I correct on this, or?
So the discussion item tonight is related to the irrigation, whether managers are satisfied with information that they have at this point, or if the managers want additional information. If the managers are satisfied, then this would be removed from the items that need to be completed before the sureties.
Got it. Okay. Yes, sir.
There's a part of this that I struggle with. First of all, if I'm interpreting all this correctly, they're trying to do what we've asked them to do. Right?
I think so.
I mean, if the most of the season was so wet, that's the problem with rainwater recapture for irrigation. You have a lot of it where you don't need it, and then you have less of it when you do need it. So, but the other part of this that think is a positive, and I realize there's no easy way to give them credit for it, is the fact that we just had on our plan that we're gonna look for opportunities to lessen the stress on groundwater resources. And given the fact that for a lot of cities in the metro, a big part of their annual water budget is irrigating lawns, then the fact that trying to move forward with stormwater reuse for irrigation is a positive thing. Now, I realize that's an aside, it doesn't completely address the fact that they might be having difficulty because of the nature of the wet cycle earlier this year with meeting the mids parameters. But I do have a question for clarification. But the bottom line is that, well, if they can't meet it in some years, what's the bottom line stress on adjoining aquatic resources?
The risk,
Right.
essentially.
I mean, what's really gonna happen if in some years where it's really wet, they can't reuse a lot of it because the ground is always saturated? So I'm not familiar with the flexible treatment option one. Can you explain that, John, so I better understand that?
Mr. President, managers, the Valley Branch rules are similar to what was developed through the MIDS project, where there's some sites where you just can't infiltrate stormwater. And so Valley Branch rules say you need to provide volume control on site. If you can't provide volume control on site, you need to look off site. If everybody agrees that you can't provide the volume control of the Valley Branch rules, you need to provide 75% total phosphorus reduction on site. And how that is achieved is usually by maybe some infiltration and then some other stormwater management practice, like a iron enhanced sand filter or a wet pond, maybe with a iron bench, something like that, to deal with the dissolved phosphorus. And then the next flexible treatment option is if everybody proves that you can't do that, then there's a flexible treatment option number 2, and that is 60% total phosphorus reduction. And you can usually achieve that by a more standard or historic type of BMP, like a wet. So the consequence here is Willowbrook, Springs of Willowbrook, that site drains to, most of it drains to Olson Lake Estates Pond and then Olson Lake or to Butle's Pond. So if they're not managing their volume on site, it could lead to additional volumes getting downstream into those water resources. With the springs at Lake Elmo, that site mostly drains to Kramer Lake. It's kind of by just to the east of the Quick Trip off of Lake Elmo Avenue and I-94. That is a semi-landlocked lake that would have to flood up, and if that floods up, it eventually gets to Rose Lake, which is where Cimarron's sewage system is. So that would be the consequence, that the volume, they're increasing the volume from what it was pre-development, and that would have an impact on the downstream resources.
From my perspective,
Yes.
I don't think we really have enough information yet. We haven't gotten a full year's worth of information to be able to make a decision. I think this is a fairly new process in terms of, the irrigation, and you make a good point, that, if we can do this type of thing, we're saving groundwater, we're doing a lot of real positive things, but it's fairly new, and boy, especially when you're new, having full information as to how well it's working under a variety of conditions, I think is really important.
You gentlemen have brought up some very good points. And I may add that there are other unsatisfied requirements. So you folks want your surety back? Is that what's going on, or share your thoughts, Mr. Jurg?
Yeah, I believe that's.
Yeah.
No.
Mr. President and Mr. President and Managers, Mark Anderson again. Just a couple of comments, and I certainly agree with John Hansen's assessment of infiltration basins and, you know, the ability to prove that those are working in wet or dry periods. Infiltration basins, of course, are really, the performance of them are based on subsurface soils and their infiltration capacity, as well as keeping the basins clean. So there's a couple of variables there that impact the performance of an infiltration basin. In this instance, with reclaimed irrigation, it's much more defined. You've got a pump capacity, you have storage capacity, you have runtime. So those elements are in place. The only one that isn't is rainfall. That's an unknown. The project can pump as long as there's water in the cistern. You know, they can pump that 1 inch per week and meet this. So I think in most years they should be able to show the pumping data meets the intended design, but there will be years where it's too dry and possibly instances where it's too wet. But I think it's more of a concern when it's too dry. There just isn't water to pump, and if they do need to irrigate, they may need to use some municipal water. So since the elements are in place, the pump and the storage capacity, that's why we're asking for approval of just the system at this time. There is some survey required for the EOF elevations. One particular area that the city pointed out, so that is underway to address that one and provide additional survey data for that EOF. And then the last item that John had mentioned is the erosion on the Tesla site. And we've been reviewing that throughout the summer, really. And it's kind of a puzzling condition. We're kind of wondering if there's a spring, a natural spring at the base of the wall that might be discharging some water. But we're also investigating the on-site HDPE pipe to make sure the joints are sealed and so forth. So we're not asking for full approval, but we would like approval of the reclaimed irrigation system this evening, and if possible, a reduction in the letter of credit while we address the other two outstanding items. And both of the outstanding items, you know, we'd like to get them addressed here in the next couple of weeks, and then get full approval from the watershed and the city.
Well, you know, it appears to me, you know, and I have no doubt the numbers show we've got pumping capacity and all that, but we just haven't shown so far that we have the management ability to manage this system and run it at the appropriate times. It appears, you know, there was a delay in getting the pump in, and I understand all that.
Right.
But personally, I'd like to, and I know it's, we don't have any water right now, but I'd like some assurance that this can be managed properly, even though we have the right pumping capacity. Because that's the reason for the surety, is to make sure that if we release the surety and then it's not managed next year and we have ideal conditions and it's not managed due to whatever circumstance out there on site, what recourse do we have to get it managed properly? I don't, is my question.
Right, not enough data, it's a concern, and I don't know, Counselor, if we have any
Well,
precedent
certainly
setting thing here.
the surety is the best recourse, right? Because it doesn't require the district expending funds necessarily to solve the problem, which if we release it, then we have the maintenance agreements and things like that. Enforcement looks more difficult without the surety.
That is essentially what we have for teeth when we're doing what we're doing. And so this is a concern, of course. And, you know, sometimes because we've dealt with this in the past, consternation, trepidation, certain words come up and kind of go, well, it doesn't seem like a big deal on the one hand. And yet we want to follow suit because the concern, of course, is that something goes wrong or that we don't have sufficient data. And then people say, oh, well, you said it was okay. And that's how I look at it. But these gentlemen have all brought up some very good points about how we're looking at this. My opinion at this point is that I don't want to release any of the surety. Doesn't mean we can't do it in the near future or something. But at this point, we want to see maybe some more data. Mr. Brower inspects. Does that seem reasonable?
Mr.
Eric,
President,
did you want to speak?
Yeah, President and managers, I'd like to maybe make one other point that really isn't necessarily an issue of the Valley Branch watershed, but I'll share screen for a moment. Part of our challenge is what I would describe as a political one, and it's related to the city in which we're doing business. So this is the current sureties that we have outstanding with the city of Lake Elmo. In particular, and again, we've had a few maybe trip ups in our operation, and obviously we're obliged to provide you with the data that you need, barring environmental conditions. But one of the unique issues that we're experiencing as a experienced developer, and we build these communities all over, and in most cases we have to provide larger letters of credit or bonds or cash for public improvements. In this case, we still have a substantial surety outstanding with the city. And I'm sure you all have dealt with the city of Lake Elmo, as have we over many years now. And it's very unusual for a city to hold a surety of this size without reduction after substantial completion of the other improvements. So part of the reason for our presence here and request tonight to at least maybe get some clarity on the rules of operation or what we'll need to do in the future to provide data is this large surety that's outstanding. The city will not reduce this until Valley Branch accepts the improvements. And you can understand why that's a challenge, because they do have the discretion and authority to do so. However, I'm curious if Mr. Hansen or the managers would be willing to help us describe the condition to the city in order to release the surety that should not be contingent on the stormwater controls.
You make a very good point, sir. I appreciate this.
We have never, in our experience and in mine, I work in several states, we've never had a surety that's been outstanding of this magnitude for public roadways we've completed and turned over for 4 years. So that's problematic. I think it's partially due to staff turnover. The city is somewhat unresponsive. We're a corporate citizen, we're a taxpayer. We have been for years, and yet we still have this very large outstanding capital liability on our books. So, and as part of that, we understand that we have this surety outstanding. I believe I'm getting involved because our construction folks couldn't attend tonight. In terms of the pumps installation, we've had some turnover on our side through and after the COVID and so on. So some of the project managers that manage Lake Elmo in particular are no longer with the company. However, I've been there 17 years, and I am hoping that I was responsible for sourcing the opportunity for the company. I want to make sure that we do right by the Watershed District, but also we're hoping that we could maybe get a little assistance in explaining what we have left, because I guess they're looking to you to accept those improvements before they release the whole, which really isn't necessary, and it truly is at their discretion.
I sincerely appreciate what you're saying. So,
President Sean,
Yes,
may I
ma'am.
ask some clarifying questions of Engineer Hansen?
please,
Do we know, so we know the capacity and at what rate and all that. Do we know the mechanisms work to fulfill, or is it just a matter of management in the right conditions to see if the volume control is met? Does that make sense, that
Mr. President, Manager, so I'll
differentiation?
try to answer it, see if I answer the question. As far as I know, the infrastructure is in place to perform. But they haven't irrigated at the rates that they committed to irrigate. And there's some back and forth between the operation manager and me, and claiming that it's not achievable in some of those emails. But yet they should have had the water because it was very wet until September, so the tanks should have been full, and they should have been able to dry those tanks in order. So they, I mean, it's been dry, so there shouldn't be any water in those tanks. And if there is any water, then they must not be achieving their 1 inch or 1.11 inch. And so I think the infrastructure is in place. It's a matter of getting them to operate it as they committed to.
That answers my question, thank you.
Is there water in those tanks?
There shouldn't be any water in those if they only collect stormwater. The only way that there would be water in them is if they're not irrigating at the rates that they said they were going to, or if they're supplementing the tanks with municipal water.
Which is what they'd have to do to satisfy their usage. Mr. Inspector,
I was, our Sean managers, I did see
excuse me,
the,
sir, go ahead.
springs at Willowbrook, setup, pump setup. I was there when the contractors installed it, and they did explain, they do have a software package that does a really nice job of tracking volume. They have reports available whenever they want. So I know that system, I believe it's identical. What they installed it in Lake Elmo, although I did not see the system in Lake Elmo. I have not seen that system yet, but if it's similar, it certainly has all the tracking capability to produce the reports that we're looking for, that the operations managers certainly have that available. It's part of the kind of the maintenance and package of the whole overall system. So I know that's available. As far as water in the tanks, I can't tell you that. I don't know that.
Yes, sir, go
It
ahead,
is a
please.
couple more questions. Number one, I mean, I understand there's an infiltration basin that's not working, right? Is that on this site or is that a different
No,
site? That's a
what I
different
was gonna
site.
say.
Okay.
This site, excuse
On
me.
this one, so,
President Reshai managers, this site only has, both sites only have underground storage containers
okay,
to take the stormwater and for reuse. There is no other ponding on those, on that specific property.
so that's a
It's a
different
little bit
site.
complicated though, because on the Willowbrook site, they're utilizing this infiltration basin that is.
Okay. Yeah, because that was my question. I mean, I saw the number for our surety on this, and I was just wondering, is there, because we're just looking at an operational thing, making sure that works, is there some possibility of a reduction in the surety on our part? But I don't know that that would help with their situation with Lake Elmo.
Because that site's in, well, the Willowbrook site's in Oakdale.
Okay,
And Springs of Lake Elmo is in Lake Elmo. And the high surety that Eric showed seems like it's the Lake Elmo site that's most problematic.
okay.
Is that entire surety for the water reduction?
I'm not sure what's all included in the Lake Elmo surety.
Was the number shown for the Valley Branch surety just Lake Elmo, or was that the total between the two sites?
That's
Yeah.
just like the 789,000 is just Lake Elmo. And that's just for that bond is just with Valley Branch.
And that dollar amount is for the entire stormwater system that's fully constructed. The reclaim portion of this stormwater system is, I believe around 70,000 for pumps and controls. So everything's in place. It's an extraordinary number to hold just to have some pump data later when it rains. At this time, the tanks are dry. They pumped what they could, but there hasn't been an additional rainfall. And they were actually trying to hold back some of the water rather than pump the full 1 inch amount. There just wasn't communication on how much needed to be pumped to meet the conditions of the design. And so now that we've gone through the pump capacity, the run times, they can set their zones accordingly and meet the requirements. It just, there wasn't a full understanding of how much to pump. They were actually trying to preserve it for each of the following weeks so that they didn't use it all at one time. So now that we have that understanding and everything's in place, it can be done when the rainfall comes again.
And John, they've been fair in working with you, with our engineering to stay abreast of their obligations, correct?
Yes.
What I'm thinking is, I like that there's an element of rigidity to what we have to do because of our concerns, but I also see your plight. And I know that's an extraordinary amount. We'd like to work with you. So a question that I have is, what might it take in terms of time to put them in a position where it satisfies us better? In other words, what do they need to do? How much data do they need to collect? What is it that they need to do to make sure that we feel better about releasing some of these funds? Is that a tough one, or?
President Marchand, I mean,
Yes,
there's- I mean, I think we're at the end of the irrigation season.
We are,
I mean,
yeah,
we're.
that's another reason I was asking.
If we did have rain, they could still irrigate, but I would imagine their operations people are looking at timing to blow those dry and winterize the system.
Right,
They
that's coming.
can't, so we're getting to the point where they're not gonna be able to really collect much more data this season. So that means it rolls into next year.
Well, I wonder if the key isn't in the surety itself and how that was calculated. If, you
Yeah,
know, a large portion of it was on the roadways, which sounds like that's the issue for Lake Elmo. You know, if they've completed that part, there aren't checklist items. I would be open to, you know, looking at reducing the surety based on, yes, they've completed this portion. But in terms of the, you know, the infiltration or the irrigation portion of it, I don't think we've got enough information. So, you know, and that may be enough for Lake Elmo to see, you know, Valley Branch has reduced the surety here for the roadways, and that would give them the ability to talk to Lake Elmo and have them reduce the surety in Lake Elmo.
do we have that? Do we have that information? The,
What,
The, how the surety was calculated. for
Yeah,
Valley
I
Branch.
know how the Valley Branch Watershed. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know how,
Yeah,
like,
this,
I'm just talking the Lake, the Valley Branch.
yes, and so,
Yeah.
Alliant would have submitted, an estimate that was approved for the Willowbrook surety, and Samatech would have submitted, estimate for that surety. And Samatech could go through and say, you know, these items are complete, and we can come back and say, yeah, we agree that those items are complete. Complicated thing with Lost Springs as Lake Elmo is that there's potentially a pipe that leaks that might need to be fixed, and that might require excavating, you know, parking lots and pretty expensive fix.
Yeah.
We want, there's a cheap
Build that
fix.
into. maintaining that. utility.
Eric has a hand raised.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify the two sureties. So, yeah, the one surety is with the Valley Branch entity, and then the $3 million plus sureties with Lake Elmo, and that's Mark. I believe that's for the roads, and then some other landscaping. And really, at this
Yes.
point,
Sewer,
we're down to
sewer and water construction. Yeah.
sewer and water construction, which have generally been accepted, and we're down to warranty issues on those. And I guess I would argue that for a good portion of the Valley Branch surety, we're probably down to warranty, but with others, as John's explained, I think it'd be fair and acceptable to us to hold surety out there for the aspects of the improvements that are not yet in warranty status.
Okay, this is, okay, let me bring this up. How much do you want?
Well, I think it's fair to cover for instance, in Willowbrook, my understanding, and again, I'm just getting up to speed on this as of 4 business days ago, but my understanding is the surety that's out there with Valley Branch, I think could just be the pump, unless I'm incorrect. It's a different situation too, because Oakdale's been willing to reduce their surety down to a reasonable threshold for all the other improvements. For us, Mark, I'm just I know we're not in the same room, but I feel like if we're at a minimum leaving the surety in place for the pump, that would make sense. But perhaps John and Mark, maybe we take a look at the drainage issue we're having. We should still leave surety out there for that for repair if we can't correct it. I think that would be fair. And for the pump itself, until the data's provided, and it's acceptable to the president and managers here. At least that's my basic request here. And furthermore, if we could have a vote of confidence from you all to work with the city, who's been reluctant to do anything without Valley Branch's approval, that would be really helpful to us.
How about a number, sir?
I think that my comment on that would be have them prepare something to send to Bar
Yes.
for an exact number of the reduction.
Yes.
So that Bar can evaluate yes or no
Yeah.
Okay,
before moving forward, and then present that to the managers for reduction in the surety.
Yes.
see why she's here?
I was
Awesome.
going to suggest that, a 10% warranty on it, which would be 78,000, but truthfully, I feel like it may be a bit more than that, to be fair to you all.
Okay,
I just don't know what that figure is until Mark can take a look at it.
you just heard our attorney. Is that something that you can do, sir?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And hopefully we can expedite this as soon as possible and make this fair for all of us.
Well,
That-
I wonder if we can still do that yet tonight, if John is comfortable and the board is comfortable. $100,000 should more than cover, I mean, the pump itself or even a pipe repair. We want to close this out, in the next couple of weeks. If we need pumping data next year, we can provide that, but 100,000 at the watershed should be an adequate amount. We'll see what the city will do with respect to a reduced escrow, but they've got $3 million right now. So if 100,000 is agreeable this evening, that would move that along so that at least the escrow can be reduced, and then we can work on the remaining items.
Mr. President, you can meet again in 2 weeks. I would suggest that you now make a decision tonight, that you request this information from them, and you could talk about this in 2 weeks.
Right,
I definitely agree with that.
yeah, on good advice. I think that's probably the best thing to do. I wish that we could help you folks sooner, but I think that's reasonable for all parties.
I agree. I didn't realize that we didn't have knowledge of of the operation. Otherwise, we would have been on this issue much sooner, and we may not have even had to have had this conversation at this point in time. So I apologize. We didn't know our obligations in the field.
Well, now you know, right?
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm glad this is coming to a close. So let's follow through. And at this point, do we need to table anything, or we just need to allow these gentlemen to do what they need to do so that they can meet with us again and we can hammer this out? Very good? Yes, sir.
I mean, I'm comfortable after this gets hashed out, we get information and evaluate and everything. I'm just wondering, as far as us interacting with Lake Elmo on this, I have no problem with us informing Lake Elmo of what we see as the punch list, so to speak, that's remaining, and we've reduced our surety to this amount because of that. I have no problem with us communicating that to Lake Elmo at that time.
That's a good point.
Yes.
We
Simple enough.
appreciate that because I believe the two are mutually exclusive.
Okay,
The
gentlemen.
storm- Thank you.
All right, you all know what you need to do. And we're gonna follow through, and we sincerely appreciate your input and that we were able to, at least come to some conclusion this evening. All right?
Thank you so
Okay.
much. Have a
Thank-
great evening.
Thank you.
Right. You have a good evening. Sir, do you have any particular?
I just want to make sure that, that the same applies for the springs at Willowbrook. Just, as far as reducing.
Can we make that assumption here? Do we need to, address that
Springs of
further?
Willowbrook, I know easements need to be recorded that cover the underground tank and other
Okay.
areas. That
So they're not-
have not been done, and so.
They need to
it's
follow
usually
up.
Pretty difficult to get those if you release the surety, so. Suggest that you keep the surety until those are recorded.
What do you say to that, sir?
Understood.
That's excellent.
If you want to submit a request, it'll be considered, but keep that in mind.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, all right. Let's see. Attorney,
Not yet, right?
what do we have left?
That's-
We added.
Oh, yeah, forgive me.
2023-18.
Yep.
I know
Mr.
you're
President,
code,
there's
but
this,
you're-
prepared a short memo here.
I just talk about. Okay, I got you. Go right ahead, sir.
MinDOT is redoing the I-94 west area. Their original plans called for an infiltration basin. They started constructing that and found that the soils just are not conducive for infiltration. So they'd like to convert that into a filtration system and be a communication between Bar Engineering and the consultant from MinDOT. I guess we agree with their assessment and we recommend that the managers allow them to convert it from an infiltration basin to a filtration.
Okay. Would any of the managers like to make a motion?
I would, give them the information, or I'd be happy to, approve the change designs and permit 2023-18. With no changes to the permit conditions.
I'll second that motion. It's been moved and seconded.
Aye.
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 It is approved. Thank you, John. Now can we talk to you, Laura?
Yes.
Awesome. Lauren. Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
attorney, please.
Yes, passed out at the beginning of the meeting and emailed earlier by Attorney Torsa. Are two agreements. One's an easement agreement. The other one is a stormwater maintenance facility maintenance agreement. These of course are really standard in the permitting process and are recorded against each property. These specific ones have been sent back and forth between Susanna and the attorney for Bridgewater Bank
Right.
shares. And they have some additions. And Susanna's desire in this was really
Thank
to
you,
bring
sir.
their attention to
Safe
the
drive.
desired changes and see if there was any concern or pushback, but I don't know that it requires a motion. I think it just requires some direction to finalize the negotiation if you're comfortable with where they're heading. We'll walk through the changes just briefly.
Start.
Yeah. Yeah, so on the stormwater maintenance agreement, the biggest change is on page 3, Article 7.
Yeah.
And I actually think it makes a lot of sense. It might be something we want to incorporate going forward. Essentially, it's saying that the owner is responsible and has liability only during the period in which they are the owner of the property. If there's a transfer of property, the new owner takes on liability from that day forward, but the liability doesn't run in perpetuity, only for actions or omissions during the time of their ownership. So that's that long addition. They also added that this is non-exclusive, meaning they can allow others to access this area, which is kind of implied because the default rule is as long as they don't interfere with the district's ability and right to access, then they can kind of do what they want, preserving the maintenance features for the stormwater. And then lastly, they added on both the easement and this one that by giving the watershed this right, they're not dedicating it to the public. So it's not going to be a public park. Or you're not going to use it for the public to come through. And then duration, they clarified or stated the agreement and rights and obligations here under are perpetual and remain in force and effect so long as the facilities are in existence and serve the property. So again, I know there are other details being hammered out with this permit. They want to start construction soon. My understanding is that there are a few things that they need to complete before they will get the go ahead to do so. But they've been eager and it seems like they're close on this. So Susanna just wanted before the managers yay or nay, so she can get back to them.
How about a yay?
Sounds good.
Good enough?
Yep,
Tell her to get on,
sounds good.
so to speak.
Lauren, have they submitted their surety yet?
No.
I don't believe so, right? Yeah.
Good question. All right, and the second one?
Second one is an easement, is the surface water drainage easement. I talked to Susanna earlier tonight because I was a bit concerned. They tried to change it into not requiring a surveyed legal description, but just saying, here's where the easement is on the attached diagram. And that's not recordable for when we record it with the county. So I clarified with Susanna that no, they know they have a surveying obligation and they're working on that. The only things added to the easement otherwise were the two things that were in the stormwater improvement maintenance agreement. That again, the easement won't be turned into a public
Right.
and things like that. So the bigger changes were to the stormwater agreement.
Also follow through, same thing.
Yep.
Okay,
Lauren, could you remind Attorney Torseth that these both are using stormwater irrigation? So I don't know if the easements are over the green space area that they've committed to irrigate or what the easements are for, but just like we had the long discussion,
Right.
they need to irrigate
Mhm.
this project.
Yes, I will. And I will explain the discussion.
very good. All right, and the surface water drainage unit, that's number 3. Was that part of the, what you just talked about? or-
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
so I think I'm good unless, but I think he just really wanted to point out those changes,
thank
but
you, yeah.
I don't need a motion or anything, just direct us to follow through.
Thank you, Ms. Lauren. Mr. Brower.
Yes, President Marchand, managers, in the packet was a report. I do have some updates, from last week. One being rice storage in Afton, if you remember from the report, everything has been addressed. They have a chloride storage system that sits near a basin. It's constructed of these large blocks and
Okay,
the system, it was grouted on the bottom, and I asked them to just describe how it was put together. I thought maybe the rest of it needed grouting, but it's a kind of an overlapping system where the blocks overlap each other. I was concerned that the chloride could just leach out between the cracks of the block and go into the infiltration or the stormwater basin, but it can't because there's actually a solid, like a slot or overlapping joint. So it really can't, it doesn't need to be grown. So that's satisfied and we'll probably be moving towards closing that permit soon. Milestone Daycare in Lake Elmo, wrapped up, all the restoration here this week. The basin's done, but here is the challenge. As John mentioned earlier about infiltration basins, they've got a brand new infiltration basin. They want to close their permit out. We have no rain. So I can't really say yay or nay until we see some water. So, but they've got vegetation, they've got everything set. But I'll have to see that that works. So it's something we'll just have to wait out. Shilton South in Lake Yamo this week, or late last week, earlier this week, actually, did start paving. So they've got the first lift of asphalt throughout the system with curb and gutter. I did talk to the developer about the plans for winter stabilization, which they plan to do around the whole perimeter. Inside the development, there still is utility work to be done. So they won't stabilize that till the utility work is done. But that one is off and running now. Roars, this might be the one we're confusing with the Willowbrook one, that site's done, everything is vegetated, except their large infiltration basin system doesn't work. We've got a meeting pending sometime next week to meet with engineers in the excavator to, they need to come up with a solution, how they're gonna address it. Basically, they're gonna have to take the water out of it. They're gonna have to, I'm not sure what they're gonna come up with. But they'll have to come up with a solution for that. And then just one quick comment, Silver Lake Outlet. I think that the 26th is when I looked at it, was 4 inches. The water was 4 inches over the weir on Tuesday.
oh, yes.
I stopped, it was about an inch, but what happens is when the water level drops, that channel gets full of stuff. So Tuesday, I cleaned out the channel because it was, as it drops, all the debris kind of flows and
You
then
did.
stops, yeah. So then I stopped by today again, just to see, did it reoccur? But actually the water level dropped where it's about a trickle. So it's actually looking okay. But that's kind of when it's flowing, there's not much of an issue, but when it goes through these periods of dropping, then the whole channel collects tree branches and everything else,
Exactly.
right? So, but it just kind of just shows you how dry it's been, that I wouldn't doubt by tomorrow that there's no water flowing up it. So, sorry, Silver Lake, the lake level's dropping.
We're back to where we were in the
You're-
spring.
You're exactly back to where we were this spring, because we had such a light winter, right? So, but were there any questions about any other areas or issues?
Sir, I have none at this point.
Okay,
Very thorough. Good night, Dave. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Surprised everybody lasted this long. I apologize for this. You know, I could comment, but I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. So, managers, we all know what happened at our tour. The question I have for you, and by the way, Counselor, thank you for attending. You know, I hope you didn't find that too boring. You know, we're different. That's why I throw that out, because some of the stuff that we talk about, people go, what? Are you kidding? What? Is that it? Yeah, because that's kind of what we saw, but it was still beautiful. Some of the area. But I just want some feedback from the managers about basic stuff. Did you guys enjoy it? Did you pick up anything new? Did you get a better grasp for our what our watershed district looks like? You know, because to me, visuals are important. And I like to have that, you know, to understand where something's going. And so I'm always gesticulating. I'm thinking, oh, where, when he was talking about where that water from, where the gentleman that were here, if that raises where that dumps, first you said Olson, and then you somehow said that it goes over by 694. You know, what happens there? Because doesn't that ultimately go through Tamblin Park or something?
So Willowbrook would drain to, some of the drains to Lake Olson, some of the drains to Olson Lake Estates Pond. But Olson Lake Estates Pond bypasses the Tri Lakes and goes into Beetle Pond, which is basically Raleigh Creek and Eagle Point Lake.
Yeah, there. And see, so with that understanding, we know what's happening there. And so I hope you gentlemen appreciated that.
I appreciate getting a little tour of the nursery there too and seeing what's going on there. And frankly, I was kind of appalled at the quality of the water in those basins. I don't know what the solution is there, but boy, it just seemed like something.
It seemed like, yeah, that there's flowage from the nursery and the horses combined. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Josh and I did meet with University of Minnesota Extension today
Yeah,
to look at irrigation, so we'll be getting the pictures update probably this week.
okay. Yeah, and I know that we've already received the first alum treatment for Goose Lake.
That
Yeah.
happened Monday and Wednesday.
Beautiful. Okay.
Have drone footage that we could look at if we'd like after.
That's nice, you know, between Africa and wait a minute, North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm telling you, we're covered. So we can watch all kinds of stuff. From Colorado. And then we're gonna get a Colorado one here soon.
Nobody wanted to look at my pictures from Iowa.
We can get, what's in Iowa?
Summit, the highest point in
Soybeans.
I'll tell you. Really kicking me to stay awake. But it's a very nice place. Okay. With that said, do you have anything in particular, Don, from any meetings with Minnesota Watershed?
Yeah, the resolutions committee just met. And, I forget, where the administrators from, Maury, speaks with the European accent. It's not Boy to Sue, but out that way.
Okay.
I should recall this, but I can't, but he's raising, a lot of fuss about the regulatory structure for fans. And I just don't know what the heck to think of it all. It just seemed like he kind of wanted to pick fights with the DNR. And so I asked Jan for a few minutes and she was equally confused. So we decided to just not pursue any of those resolutions, to put together a work group and to determine if there really is an issue here or not. So
Okay,
I've got to catch up on some of the chloride stuff that's developing as well, and I'll try to have more details on that. I have to catch up with Jan on that as well, so
very good, sir.
as far as what could be happening with this coming legislative session, so.
Okay,
And that, if you're interested in how Minnesota watersheds is, gonna try to pursue legislative work on the Tuesday night, before the start of the annual meeting, that we are gonna hold a legislative workshop.
okay,
So the new lobbying firm can go ahead and kind of educate the general membership of Minnesota watersheds on how it's supposed to work. One of the misunderstandings is that a lot of the watersheds will assume that, well, we have these issues and we want the lobbying firm to work on those issues for us. And there's no way the lobbying firm has those resources to do that. So Minnesota watersheds gathers up a couple of key issues, for example, chloride and drainage or whatever. We have them work on that. And then what they do on these smaller issues that are local for watersheds and not statewide issues, they keep an ear close to the ground to see what might be happening so they can report back to those watersheds and they can contact their elected officials or whatever it is they might want to do. So a lot of that is going to be discussed at that session on Tuesday evening. If you have any interest in how the legislative process works from the lens of Minnesota watershed. So,
we shall consider it, sir.
okay.
All right. Rick, Mr. Brock, nothing? We're okay? I just want to add that, don't you guys get all too excited now, because I'm going to say nice things. Mr. Armstrong has been reappointed. Here's a letter. I'll spare you. But this is a beautiful thing, and I personally want to thank you, gentlemen, for working with you, and I think that, I think we have a nice crew, and I love your input, and thank goodness you're all here. Yeah. I used to be scared when I would show up at these meetings. They talk about stuff, I go, oh no, what do I gotta vote on, you know, but there's a lot of things I didn't know either, but things have changed, and you guys hit the ground running. This is good for us. So I'm glad Mr. Armstrong's on board because he brings another element to this, an important element to our managerial makeup. Okay. With that said, the next meetings are October 24th and November 14th. Yeah. Can I have a quorum?
I will be up on the mountain in Colorado and
10,000 feet.
I'm so excited to hear the results of the debate on the two developments that I accepted the climate.
Yeah.
Douglas first, see if we can get a cell signal, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll happen. But I'll be here for the November meeting.
Very good, sir. Okay. And the Metro Watershed Meeting, Capital Regional Watershed District, October 22 and 7 p.m. John, what's going on there?
President, Sean Managers, Metro Watershed meets, I believe it's quarterly, and they alternate between virtual and in person. So the next meeting is October 22nd. If I was told what's on the agenda, I've forgotten. Typically I have
Okay.
Speakers from state agencies give updates, and then they usually have one presentation about a topic of interest.
So this is something the managers can attend virtual or in person, however that works out.
This one will be in person, so if the managers want to attend, it's at Capital Region's office.
So we have to,
That's where St. Paul.
oh, okay. Could you provide us with an email reminder?
Sure.
Due time?
I normally try to attend, but I'll be leaving that day for Colorado. So
Okay. I'll go in your place.
that'd be great. Yeah, Tina Carstens is the current
Well,
Tina and Laura,
She's Mawa, yeah, she's Mawa director.
Okay,
Tina Carson's from Ramsey, Washington, and Laura Jester from Bassett Creek, that all are co-chairs of facilities.
and then, of course, the budget workshop with the Washington County Board of Commissioners on November 12th. Again, everybody knows about that. I plan on attending that, so that should be no big deal, but it's, might be kind of fun, if I could use that word. And one more item. Motion to adjourn.
Like,
Been moved and seconded.
Aye.
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 Right, we are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. John, are we turned off? Okay.